who you are, but if you're like the average person in any country, there are multiple generations working together. And I actually believe every one of them has something to add. And we've got to get this right.
5 generations at the workplace.
Tim Elmore is with me.
Joining us for more on that generation gap at work here in studio, author Tim Elmore.
With me right now is Dr. Tim Elmore.
He wrote the book on bridging the generation gap in the workforce.
A best-selling author. He's got a new book out, a new kind of diversity.
Sometimes we find ourselves colliding instead of collaborating. And my goal in the next half hour or so is to really give you some tools on making the different generations on your team your competitive advantage. I had a conversation with a father recently that said to me, Tim, I'm not having the same conversations with my teenage kids that I had with my dad when I was a teenager. You know what I said to him? You can thank Google, Siri, and Alexa for that one. They don't need adults for information. They need you for interpretation. Here's my challenge. Let's get together and create a strong generation. God bless.
So everyone, it's time again for Live2Lead, our Maxwell Leadership Conference. And this year, it's going to be exciting. And as you can see, I have a guest with me. And the surprise part of this year is that he will be live in the room in Guyana. Yes, you heard me correct. We are bringing Dr. Tim Elmore to Guyana. And some of you who may not know Dr. Tim Elmore, just a little bit about him is that he is the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization created to develop emerging leaders. His work grew out of 20 years of serving alongside Dr. C. Maxwell. And Dr. Elmore has appeared on the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, USA Today, Psychology Today, and he has been featured on CNN's Headline News, Fox News, Newsmax, and Fox and Friends to talk about leading multiple generations in the marketplace. He has written over 35 books, including Habitudes, Images That Form Leadership Habits and Attitudes, 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership, and a new kind of diversity, making the different generations on your team a competitive edge. And today we will be talking about that book that is so needed right now, a new kind of diversity. And there are many training about this that we do also through our organization. But today you have in person here, Dr. Tim Elmore, that is going to share with us about the generation gaps in the workplace. And he will be speaking on that at our Live2Lead conference this year, where you get to ask him questions. How exciting is that? And Dr. Tim Elmore, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today so that we can talk about your trip to Guyana and also this whole aspect of the generation gap. Would you like to add anything to what I've just said about you?
Well, you probably said too much already, Shanti, but I am honored to be with you today and when I'm there in Guyana. Very much looking forward to meeting the leaders that are there who I know want to do a good job leading the teams that are under them. But I'm telling you, this topic that you've asked me to talk about is such a passion for me, because today in our workplaces, we have maybe 5 generations attempting to collaborate together. And sometimes we build walls instead of bridges between each other because we're just so different. So I can hardly wait to get there, share some insights with you, and then field questions so each leader can go back and feel like they have some tools in their toolbox to do this job well.
Well, I know that you have the knowledge, you have the skills, you have the expertise, everything on this topic here. And we're all going to benefit a lot because, as you said, right now in the workplace, we are struggling. The older generation is not able to communicate with the younger, and the younger is having a hard time. And it seems like we're all from a different planet right now. But I love it how you brought it in your book, and it's specifically for each generation. You brought out how to lead them, and I know you're gonna deal and speak more into that. But let's talk about this generation gap. And you said it was first noticed in 1960 and has widened today, making collaboration and synergy on a team more challenging than ever, like what you just said there. So how would you unpack this problem for our listeners? Maybe give us a little more insight.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I began to see this in the US, so I knew it was a problem in my home country. I would get to workplaces or sports teams or nonprofit organizations, and I would see that the people who were older, maybe 40s, 50s, or 60s, would just have a difficult time, like you just said, communicating or understanding the language and the verbiage and the habits of the younger generation. And so then I began to travel all over Singapore, Brazil, Latin America, Europe. And I was noticing this generation gap is everywhere. And Shanti, what I noticed so acutely over the last 10 years is the gap has gotten bigger between generations when the screens that are in our life have gone from public to private. When I think about my childhood growing up, we had one screen in our house, and it was a television. One time, in one room. And our whole family gathered around the television, and we watched a show together, and we talked together, and we laughed together. We were together. When you fast forward to today, we have our own screens in our hands today, don't we? And oh my gosh, mom and dad may be on a completely different platform than their daughter. And an employer might be on a different completely planet than their young 20-something employee. So I began to say, what could I do to offer tools where the younger two generations, the millennials and the Gen Zers, could connect with the Gen Xers and the baby boomers that are older, maybe over 40 years old. And in this book, I designed it to be an encyclopedia, like a guidebook that would give answers on this generation, that generation. And my goal is not just for generations to tolerate each other, but to actually get the very best out of each other. So that's my goal. When I'm with you in person live, my hope is to have a great dialogue where everyone is excited about the ideas they're going to walk home with and hopefully take home to use at their workplace.
So tell me about this though, is that, what are some of the most common things that create this discard between the generations in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, one common one I've already mentioned is communication. Sometimes a person that's been in the workplace for 15 or let's say 20 years have a different way of communicating, not only the words they will use, but the platforms they'll use. So a Gen Zer, we know how some young employees right out of school will join the workplace and they're wanting to send text messages, or sometimes they won't message at all. They just won't show up at work, some days. And we go, what are you doing? So I think, here's what I think about the day we're in. We as leaders are going to need to both listen and coach. I'll give you a good illustration. I was speaking this morning to a group, and I was talking about how way back when I was a little boy, the United States decided to put a man on the moon. We were going to fly up to the moon, up in space, and Neil Armstrong would be the first person that would actually step out on the moon. Well, when our president, John Kennedy, decided to do this, he made a speech, and NASA, our space program, did not even have the technology to do such a thing. So they brought in brand new technology, but the older team members at NASA didn't understand this new technology. All the young employees that had been freshly graduated out of college and MIT did understand the new technology. So the older generations transitioned to a mentor role. They called them sinsus, simulator supervisors. They were going to be coaching, but the young people were going to be the key to the future. And they did understand the technology. And it was the young people in their 20s that actually landed a man on the moon. Now, I would bet most people listening would have no idea that's how it worked. But I think today I need, as an older person, need to take the role of coach and mentor and leader. But I need to empower that younger generation who understands new applications, new technology, new smart technology to really be useful in our workplace. And I think if we can turn our frustration into fascination with each other, we're actually going to see that it's a competitive advantage in our job, in our workplace for the future.
Oh, see, the whole aspect of mentoring, I think that's one area that can close the gap between what's going on. And sometimes I think, do the older generation want to listen? Do they want to actually mentor, take the time with the whole world going so busy?
Yeah.
But it also calls for flexibility.
Yeah.
I know you talk about being flexible without giving in. And
Yeah.
how can leaders develop maturity in this area to do what you just said?
Well, this is my biggest challenge because I'm an older veteran right now talking to you. So here's what I've had to learn. There are obviously some timeless skills and values that we want to pass on to the younger generation, but they bring some timely intuition with them about, like I said, about technology, about apps, about where the world is going and where culture today is going. So we began doing something that I will talk about when I'm with you. We call it reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring. That's where an older and a younger team member get together. They share each other's story. You always find something in common when you share stories with each other. But then both sides, the young and the old, mentor each other in their superpowers. So the old have much to pass on to the young, but I have learned to listen to Andrew, who serves on our team, and he's 30 years younger than me. Or Cam, who serves on our team. He's 40 years younger than me. But as I learn to listen as well as coach, I'm telling you, I'm not frustrated. I'm fascinated. I'm learning to stop being furious and I'm starting getting curious about what they bring to the team. And when I do that, we're all learning from each other. We're all coaching each other, but we have to check our ego at the door and maybe our logo at the door and say, let's be humans and let's learn to lead this organization together. That's my goal.
Definitely. So from furious, maybe that should be your next book. Curious to
Curious to curious. That's right.
Yes, indeed. That are we being curious enough? And I think curiosity leads to you have to listen.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. When I interviewed respondents from all 5 generations, from oldest to youngest, I asked each one, what do you want from others, from other generations when they interact with you? Well, I got a lot of answers, as you can imagine. But 3 answers came up in every generation. The old and the young wanted 3 things. Number 1 was humility. In other words, they were all saying, would you approach me with a humble spirit where you realize I have more to grow in, even though I'm old or even when I'm young? Number 2, respect. I think everybody longs for respect from the others. That means we begin with belief. We don't say, you got to earn my respect, son. We say, I'm going to begin with belief. And then thirdly, every generation said they want curiosity from the others. Isn't that good? In other words, would you please approach me curious as to what I might offer to this team? Think about a workplace, listeners, where we are showing humility, respect, and curiosity with everyone we meet, clients, customers, and fellow employees. I can only imagine a world, and that's the world we want to build, Shanti. That's what we're going to try to do on that day we're together.
Definitely. That is exactly what we're doing. And it's about developing the leaders in you And these are some of the challenges when I think about when reading your book is that when the older generation was there, they didn't have so many issues to deal with per se. But now the different thing. My mom told me she can't like bring up children this day and age.
Yeah. 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 I've thought that too. I don't even want to be a parent these days. So you know what? You asked me about being stubborn without giving in. I have found I should only be stubborn about a few things, the core values of our team, the core values of our mission, but I must be open-minded on almost everything else. And that's what's difficult when we age, to stay open. So that day we're together, I'm going to talk about how do we stay open-minded while being stubborn only about a few things that are core to our company. Yeah.
And I think also we need to be careful with our stereotyping.
Yes, it's so true. I'll talk about that when we're together. It's so easy to stereotype these young people that are right out of school, and we think they're lazy or, they're fragile snowflakes or something like that. We have terms in America that we use, and it's so disrespectful. But I know why. We don't understand them. Yeah. And they often don't understand us. So the way we stop stereotyping is say, let me seek to understand before being understood. That's going to be key.
I like that.
Yeah.
We need to understand.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to being curious and to be able to listen so that you can understand where that person's coming from instead of stereotyping them. And, I love these different areas that you bring out when you use leadership terms, but using, I think in the habitude when you talk about chess and checkers and in leadership, and tell us a little bit about that, how that play into where leaders are, how they treat others.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think very often when we receive leadership training, we're told, treat everybody alike, treat everybody equal. After all, we're all equal. That's probably the worst advice I can give somebody. Even though people are equal, I have learned that the difference between how I should lead them is like comparing the game of checkers with the game of chess. So think about those two games. Both games have the same game board. So we could be tempted to think, oh, it must be the same game. It's not. When I play the game of checkers, all my pieces look alike. They all move alike. So I treat them all alike.
Yep.
When I play the game of chess, if I'm going to win, I have to know what each piece can do. A knight and a bishop and a king and a queen and a pawn and a rook. Only in knowing the strength of each piece can I win. I think great leaders play chess with their people. I think mediocre leaders play checkers with their people and treat them all alike. So it's us reading our people before we start leading our people. That's going to be key. And in today's world, they're also different. People in their 20s have grown up in a very different world than people in their 50s or 60s. So again, the key is I got to read them before I lead them.
Love that. Read them. I once did a video also speaking about the same chess and checkers taken from your book to help us understand how to treat one another. But I know that there's so much, we have you for 2 days in Guyana, and we're going to learn so much from you. And, the nuggets that we're going to get to take back into our workplaces and bring a change, it's going to be priceless. And so, Dr. Tim Elmore, before we close off this interview, tell our viewers why they should come to this conference.
Okay. Well, I don't understand all things for sure, but I know this host, Shanti, is a great leader herself. And I've gotten to know her just a little bit over time. But I believe that understanding these different generations is going to be key to the future. Think about it. Hard times like we're in right now usually produce a strong generation. A strong generation usually produce good times. Good times, unfortunately, produce a weak generation, which in turn leads to hard times. So I want to talk about what if we committed ourselves to lead the young people on our teams, to be committed to be great leaders, great parents, great coaches, and so that the future that's ahead of us becomes the greatest future that we could hope for. Those young people are standing on our shoulders as they lead the way and go further and faster than we did. My hope that day, Shanti, just like you said, will be an incredible day together, unforgettable day, where we feel like I have some tools I can use the rest of my career.
I know for sure that you will get some tools, out from Dr. Tim Elmore. So, Dr. Tim Elmore, I must say thank you very much. I know you're very busy, and we are just so excited that you will be with us again in October 25th and 26th. And so those dates, you can't, plan anything. Please do put aside this to come and join us in this conference and get to meet Dr. Tim Elmore in person. Yeah, and you can ask him any question as he finishes his presentation. You can take pictures, get him to sign your book and all of that. So it's going to be an exciting time with everything that we have planned. Dr. Tim Elmore, any final word before we close?
Well, I can hardly wait to come. I've heard so much about Guyana over the years, and I can hardly wait to get there and eat your food and greet you and get to know you. I mean that. So please show up. I'll be there. And we're going to have a great, great time together. If nothing else, we're going to celebrate together, becoming better leaders for the future.
Yes. So thank you again. And guys, looking forward to seeing you there. So take care.